Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Amplify Clearwater. We're excited to bring a unique podcast to you today. Today with me, I have Mike Cochran, who is Assistant Special Agent in Charge with Homeland Security Investigations. He has been with federal law enforcement for many years and joined HSI in 2003 after the agency was formed. They're based out of Tampa. And so many of our membership and members and business owners in the community, managers, operators, don't realize the tie between Homeland Security Investigations and the protections that you offer to businesses and their employees every single day. So thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Thank you for being willing to share a little bit about HSI and what you do and what you offer the business community. And also for those that are looking to get involved, talking about the Citizens Academy that you have, other programs that our community may want to get plugged into and give back through volunteer efforts or others with HSI. So with that, Mike, I know that you prepared a presentation for us today, and I welcome you and look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I do have a presentation. I'll just pop this thing up real quick and then we'll get started. All right, can we see that?
We can. Looks great.
All right. So I'll say good afternoon because it's afternoon here in Tampa, even though I'm not sure when when everyone will hear this, whether it be morning or evening. I'll say good afternoon because it's afternoon here. My name is Mike Cochran. I am an Assistant Special Agent in Charge of HSI, Homeland Security Investigations here in Tampa. By way of background on myself, like I was mentioned previously, I've been in federal law enforcement for about 20 years now. I've been with HSI since the agency was created in 2003. I have a responsibility for about 20% of the overall operations for the HSI Tampa Area Responsibility, or AOR. You'll notice that in law enforcement, like other government entities, we speak in acronyms. And so if I do that, I promise I will try not to do that. And if I do, I will explain what they are. And if I don't, then please feel free to stop me and have me explain what the acronym is. So yeah, like I said, I have about 20% of the operational responsibility for the office. There are 5 total ASACs, or Assistant Special Agents in Charge, that are responsible for operations here in Tampa. 3 of us sit here in Tampa, 1 in Orlando, and 1 in Jacksonville. And obviously that would make up 100% of the operational responsibility for HSI. I have lived and worked in this job in Denver, in San Diego, and Washington, D.C., and now in Tampa. I am super excited to be here because I'm from here, which makes it a great thing for me because I got to come home. My family is all here. My wife is from here. So nice to be able to come home and live and work in a place that you're familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide now. So today I kind of want to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what HSI is, who we are, what we do, what our makeup is, what our organization looks like, and what our priorities are. I'll even talk a little bit about how to become an agent, and I think that will be of interest to some of you folks. And hopefully at the end, you guys will have an appreciation for who we are, what HSI does. It's an interesting time to be part of HSI because a lot of times people aren't really familiar with who we are. And so it's opportunities like this that we appreciate to get the word out on who HSI is and what we do. So starting from who we are, the real simple fact and the simple part about HSI is we are the principal investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security. We're also, interesting enough, the 2nd largest federal law enforcement agency in the U.S. government. The FBI is bigger than us. The mission of HSI is pretty simple. Our mission is to investigate, disrupt, dismantle criminal organizations that threaten our national security, our public safety, and our border security. And they usually do this by exploiting some facet or some part of our legitimate trade, travel, and financial systems for some criminal gain. The typical chart that everyone wants to put up and what the organization looks like and how we're sort of laid out is up on the screen now. You should see that. So again, a lot of acronyms, but I'll explain them. As a workforce, HSI consists of about 10,000, give or take, employees. That includes special agents like myself, criminal analysts, mission support personnel, and contract staff. And we're located throughout the world. We're not just in the United States. Most of our personnel, however, are located in the United States. And these 30 offices you see up on the screen up there, we call them SAC offices, or Special Agent in Charge offices. Those Special Agent in Charge offices are further broken down into smaller sub-offices, giving us about 225 total offices throughout the country. And you can see Tampa down there in the bottom right corner in Florida there. Here in HSI, we also have a pretty interesting program that involves task force officers, and that's a program that allows us to take other federal, state, or local law enforcement officers and make them task force officers. They're essentially HSI special agents operating in that way. And all told, we have about 3,000 of those folks who work for us as well, furthering the HSI mission across the country. Like I said, we're not just located domestically. We are an international law enforcement organization. Again, a lot of people don't know this, but HSI represents the largest international footprint within DHS. We've got about 80 different offices located throughout the world in about 50 countries. And those offices are located within embassies or consulates, or some of the Department of Defense Global Combatant Commands like SOCOM here in Tampa, or CENTCOM here in Tampa, EUCOM in Europe. So we have agents or liaison agents in those locations throughout the world. All total, about 450 personnel assigned overseas. And the reason for this is they're helping to push our mission out, push our borders out, and make sure that we're getting in front of things that are happening outside of our country that affect our country. Sorry. So from an HSI Tampa perspective, I apologize, I don't have a slide that shows the Tampa area responsibility, but I can explain it pretty easily. Everyone's familiar with Florida who lives here. The HSI Tampa Special Agent in Charge is responsible for 58 of the 67 counties, so it's a huge area of responsibility. We do our job with about 280 personnel in about 10 field offices. So like I said before, Tampa, picture that as the mothership. That's where the Special Agent in Charge sits, the boss of the entire area responsibility. And then myself and two other Assistant Special Agent in Charge sit here, an Assistant Special Agent in Charge in Orlando, another one in Jacksonville. And then we have smaller sub-offices in Fort Myers, Sarasota, Gainesville, Cocoa Beach, Tallahassee, Panama City, and Pensacola. Again, like I mentioned about the task force officers, we have about 150 of those folks from about 53 different agencies in the Tampa area responsibility. So from an investigative standpoint, HSI has a really, really broad spectrum of investigative responsibilities. And those are up on the screen right there. You can see them. At first glance, it might look like there are only 4, but I promise you there are 5. And that's because the green bar coming down the middle of the cyber and financial crimes kind of cross-cuts all of our priorities, and they list it in that way, and I can explain why that is in a second. So yeah, we sort of define these 5 strategic enforcement priorities or enforcement priorities in the way that you can see on the board. But basically the 5 are cyber and financial crimes as a number 1, crimes of exploitation and victimization is number 2, public safety, which is essentially narcotics, number 3, global trade investigations, number 4, and national security and counterterrorism, number 5. Now within those priorities, we break them down, which you can see on the screen up here, into investigative programmatic areas. And I know everyone can read, and I'm not going to read them to you, but I want to point out a few things that I feel are important because, again, not knowing who HSI is and what we do, you might not think about some of these things. So we have obvious things like narcotics smuggling. I just talked about that. Money laundering. Those are obvious things that we might be doing just by the nature of our job. But things like human rights violations and war crimes, people generally don't think about stuff like that and think about that as something that would be investigated by federal law enforcement, but it is. Cultural property, art, and antiquity smuggling is another really huge investigative programmatic area that we cover. And again, something that generally the public won't think about, but there are always nice pieces of art or expensive pieces of art or cultural antiquities that go missing in the world that show up on the black market, and we work to find those things and repatriate them into the countries where they belong. So I'm just going to run through here quickly the priorities we talked about, and I'll sort of break them down to make them make a little bit more sense in terms of from a local perspective. So like I mentioned before, the cyber and financial crime sort of cross-cut everything, but I'll start with financial crime. HSI really is a leader in terms of investigating financial frauds, financial schemes, anything that involves people using our legitimate financial system to defraud somebody or scam somebody out of money is something that we would investigate, whether it be something that happens only in the United States or something that happens outside the United States but affects somebody in the United States. And so just as an example, in 2020, HSI Tampa seized about $29 million in assets in support of our financial investigations. And this included cash, stocks, airplanes, vehicles, houses, boats, and even virtual currency. So again, the reason people commit crimes is generally a financial reason. And so for that reason, financial crimes is a huge investigative program for us because it does touch really everything we do. Cybercrime is something that's always changing. It's evolving. It's up and coming. It's something that we have to stay on top of because the technology changes. It seems like by the minute, and everyone has a computer in their hand that's more powerful than any computer that we've seen. In history when we were growing up, you couldn't have imagined to have the kind of power you have in your hand with this phone. And now things are changing so fast, and everything is on the internet, and everything happens in cyberspace. And so we are really trying to get out in front of the dark web and things that happen in the dark web, and be leaders in the cybercrime world. And that includes cyber intrusions. People that are trying to hack into public utilities and things like that. We saw that here in Tampa recently around the Super Bowl, where a local water facility was hacked. And things like that are things we're trying to stay on top of, and trying to find agents and analysts who are willing and able to stay on top of that sort of investigation and continue to lead us into the future. Real quick, with regard to cybercrime, it's the times we're in right now with COVID are on everybody's mind. And so one of the things we did here at HSI Tampa was we started to really focus on cyber-related crimes that might have some sort of COVID-related nexus. And in 2020, we really focused on people who might be become victims because of some sort of COVID-related fraud. And in that regard, we were able to dismantle about 300 websites, take websites down essentially that were being operated overseas, that were selling, counterfeit PPE and pretend cures for coronavirus and things like that. We were able to take down about 300 of these websites and also repatriate about $200,000 in funds that people paid to buy things that might be counterfeit or might be fake to victims here in the local area. So that was a really nice thing that we were able to do with regard to coronavirus, and something that is on everybody's mind right now. So crimes of exploitation and victimization, again, maybe something that people might not necessarily think about when it comes to federal law enforcement, but crimes like human trafficking and labor trafficking and child exploitation, child sexual exploitation are really important, and we want to protect people from being victimized. That's the bottom line. So here in Tampa, we participate throughout the AOR, throughout the area of responsibility, in about 6 different human trafficking task forces. And again, our focus with these task forces is to find victims and rescue victims. It's not to, necessarily put people in jail, although that is a nice, extra thing. But the main goal of us being a part of these task forces and focusing on crimes of exploitation and victimization is to make sure that people are not being victimized and find victims and rescue them. We also are involved really heavily in the protection of children, especially where children are being sexually exploited. And so in 2020, HSI special agents made about 159 arrests, about 141 seizures, and conducted about 87 search warrants in support of child exploitation investigations. And again, going back to the victims, whether it be a human trafficking victim or a child who is being sexually exploited, we were able to rescue about 59 victims in 2020 as a result of our agents and their investigations. So public safety, again, like I mentioned in the lead up to this, it's primarily a narcotics priority and ensuring that drugs are not crossing our borders and making their way out onto the streets. And we all know that's a real uphill battle, but we're doing our best to make sure that that doesn't happen. So one of the ways we do these sort of investigations here in Tampa and across the country is through a task force we call the Border Enforcement Security Task Force, or BEST, B-E-S-T. And the BEST allows us to give our authorities to task force officers, like I've mentioned in the past. We can give our authorities to federal, state, local, and tribal task force partners, and they can then do the work of an HSI special agent in furtherance of making sure that, you know, opioids and methamphetamine and cocaine and, you know, things like that are not making their way out onto the street. So in 2020 here in Tampa, a lot of people might find this to be a shock, but the numbers are there. In 2020, through the BEST and other narcotics enforcement programs, we seized about 130,000 pounds of narcotics. And again, that includes things like cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and we made about 144 arrests. So that group stays really busy here in Tampa, and we're, again, making sure that the drugs that cross our border don't necessarily all, if we can, make their way out to the streets and to the communities that we all live in. The next priority we talked about is global trade. And this is a priority that's really near and dear to my heart because I worked this type of investigation for about 15 years when I was a working agent. Again, something that the general public may not necessarily think of. It's not something that, you know, you would think about in terms of a crime, but these are crimes that involve people trying to steal our technology, essentially. Like if you think of the most critical military technology we have, or the most critical technology we have used to go to space, and there are countries out there like China, like Iran, like North Korea, who want to steal our technology, who want to reverse engineer that technology, who want to use our technology and their systems to possibly hurt people in the United States, our war fighters, our, you know, citizens, or whoever. And so a huge part of our mission is to ensure that our most sensitive technology is not being smuggled, pirated, you know, sold illegally, traded illegally out there without, you know, us at least knowing and making sure that the people who authorize that kind of stuff in the U.S. government, like the State Department, like the Commerce Department, know that that stuff is going on. This investigative program also includes the violation of intellectual property rights. Again, you know, we all watch movies. We all see that banner that comes up when you go to the movie theater that says it's illegal to, you know, steal this movie or tape this movie or reproduce this movie and sell it. And so that is one of the things that we are heavily involved with. We're making sure that the intellectual property that our companies in America have stays theirs and isn't stolen and used, because that kind of stuff affects our economy. When U.S. companies can't make money because their technology or their products are stolen and pirated and reverse engineered, it affects our economy. So as an example, counterfeit airbags. It's something that, you know, again, you wouldn't necessarily think about, but if people are selling counterfeit airbags on Amazon or, you know, on the internet or wherever, and folks in the States are buying those counterfeit airbags and they're not functioning properly and then deploying, and people's, you know, lives aren't being saved because the airbag is counterfeit and faulty, well, that's a public safety problem. And so that's one of the things that we're really, really concerned with. So to kind of bring it back to a local perspective, in 2020, HSI Tampa seized more than $25 million as part of investigations into entities of concern who are working on behalf of the Iranian government to circumvent sanctions against Iran. And again, that goes back to the global trade part of this conversation, and the idea that there are countries out there who will actively try to steal stuff from us so that they can better themselves. National security, again, something that is hugely important for us. And in this priority, we are almost always in a support role to the FBI, which is fine with us. The FBI is absolutely the lead when it comes to terrorism cases, but believe me when I tell you, we are right there with them. In terms of participation in the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, which are task forces that are in place around the country and around the world. HSI is the second leading contributor to those task forces next to the FBI. So we have a bunch of personnel, a bunch of agents, a bunch of analysts assigned to work terrorism cases with in lockstep with the FBI, and we are very happy to do it that way. So here in Tampa, we're a part of 7 different joint terrorism task forces, or JTTFs. That includes JTTFs across RAOR from Tampa to Jacksonville, to Fort Myers, Cocoa Beach, Sarasota, all across the offices I talked about. We have 7 different participants, or 7 different JTTFs we participate in. And then another statistic we're pretty proud of in terms of the counterterrorism mission is we play a significant role in about 90% of the terrorism-related disruptions across the country where the JTTF is concerned. So by that I mean, if the JTTF and the FBI are working a terrorism case, sometimes proving that a person is a terrorist is really difficult from a legal perspective, but you might be able to prove that they're smuggling drugs or they're a money launderer or something like that. And so we can use our authorities, our HSI authorities, to help prove that the person is guilty of a crime, maybe not necessarily being a terrorist, but again, they're using our authorities to disrupt a network possibly that might be looking to do us harm. So all those things lead up and culminate into us securing the border, which really is one of the primary missions of our agency. When it comes right down to what we're supposed to be doing as HSI special agents is protecting the integrity of our border, making sure that the things and the people that move across our borders are doing it in the legal way, and everything's on the up and up. And when we are investigating the cases in the programmatic areas like I just talked about in the right way, we're doing our best to make sure that happens. So all that stuff leads us back to a real quick snapshot, which you guys can see on the screen there, of Homeland Security investigations at a glance. This is the entire agency, and again, some pretty shocking numbers there. And if I told you, I don't have the actual statistics to prove this, but I'm just sort of guessing here based on my knowledge of the federal law enforcement world that, we are an agency that arrests more people, seizes more drugs, seizes more money, disrupts more child sexual predators, arrests more child sexual predators, does more human trafficking than any federal law enforcement agency in the government, FBI, DEA, ATF. I feel very confident saying that. Again, I'm not, don't take that as gospel because I don't have the statistics to prove that, but just knowing what I know about my partner agencies, and I love those people, I think that it's safe to say that we are doing our fair share. We have, almost 32,000 criminal arrests in the agency last year, $1.8 billion in currency and assets seized, 100 pounds of fentanyl. That stuff's killing people around the country right now, and we're seizing it at that rate is amazing. Methamphetamine is huge right now, and 178,000 pounds of methamphetamine in a year is no drop in the bucket. So we're pretty proud of our statistics. We're pretty proud of our mission. Again, probably the biggest, busiest federal law enforcement agency in the government that you've never heard of, but hopefully this presentation will have changed that. And if there are questions, we are available via my contact information is there via telephone, via email. We also have a Twitter account, which is @HSI Tampa, and we have a Citizens Academy, which is a pretty cool experience. We're pretty proud of it. We've run 4 classes, I want to say now. They are pretty intense. We put between 12 and 16 citizens that we pick based on an application process through a Citizens Academy at least once a year. And coronavirus has obviously put a little bit of a hold on that, but we will get this thing up and running again. But we basically put citizens in the local area from the local community, people like yourself, through an academy that starts in this conference room here with some overview like you just saw. And then we get you out on the street and we put you into investigative situations that are tied into those programs we just talked about. So you will go out on the street and you might, work a pretend human trafficking case with, people who are acting, but, essentially it feels real. You might go to the seaport at the Port of Tampa and search a cargo container for drugs. You might do a money laundering operation. You might do a search warrant. It changes all the time, but the Citizens Academy is really interesting, and it's a great way for us as HSI special agents and HSI employees to connect with the community and to get the word of HSI and all the great work we're trying to do in the community out there to you folks. So with that, I'll turn off the PowerPoint here and go back and we can take some questions if you want.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. That was a wonderful presentation and overview, and I know a lot of information to fit into a short amount of time. So thank you for hitting the highlights, especially for those that might be listening instead of watching. And certainly it's just amazing the work that you do every single day. And you're right, people, it's the things that go unnoticed. We go about our daily lives every day and don't know about the things that HSI and other law enforcement agencies even accomplished or tackled, that, and we may never know about them. But thank you for the role that you play in keeping us safe. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with local law enforcement. Obviously, we know our chief of police very well, and we know our sheriff very well. They're good friends of the business community. So tell us a little bit about what the relationship is like between HSI and local law enforcement.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, like I said, we run that relationship primarily through our task force officer program, and we have so many task force officers from so many different local agencies here, and myself and the other ASACs and the special agent in charge are constantly going out into the community to meet with our local partners. As an example, tonight we're going to be out at a memorial service at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. So it's really about getting out there and shaking hands and making sure that everybody knows we're on the same team here, and ensuring that this is one team, one fight. It's not federal law enforcement against local law enforcement against state law enforcement. It really is one team, one fight. And we in Tampa, I can tell you with 100% certainty, like I said, I've worked in Denver and in San Diego and in DC. There's no place that I've ever been that has better law enforcement relationships than here in Tampa. 100%. From all spectrum, federal, state, local, we all know each other. We talk to each other on the phone. We email with each other. We do things socially a lot of times together. So the people of the public, people in public here in Tampa should feel very confident knowing that the relationships that exist in law enforcement across the spectrum are really tight and really good here in Tampa.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit. So I'm sure you're aware, our mayor's wife, and certainly our women's group under Amplify Clearwater has been very interested in the subject of human trafficking and how we can get engaged in the business community and the human trafficking conversation. Tell us a little bit and any ideas or pointers you may have for those looking to do more and really engage and make a difference in human trafficking in our community.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, if you're interested in human trafficking, please reach out to us. My contact information is up there, and they can get it through you. We have a really robust human trafficking program here that's connected into a lot of the NGOs around here, and there is a task force here locally in Tampa that is run out of St. Pete PD. That's a Bay Area Human Trafficking Task Force that we take a huge role in. Again, the Super Bowl was just here. We had a lot of activity going on around here, even though it was a COVID Super Bowl. There was still the thought that might be something that we would have to address. And, like I said, the local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement folks came together, and we were pretty successful in making sure that wasn't going on. So human trafficking is absolutely a priority for us here in Tampa, and we feel like we're doing a great job of addressing it and, again, trying to rescue victims as a first priority, not put people in jail unless they deserve to go to jail for being traffickers. But our first goal is to find those victims and make sure that they're taken care of. And again, we're doing that through the task force here and the NGOs we have partners with. And I hope that you guys will reach out to us and look for more information. We can connect you with the supervisor who runs that group and make sure that you guys get what you need.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll be in touch more on that. Maybe if it's more just to talk about that in depth to those among our membership that are very interested in the conversation. We touched on Citizens Academy a little bit. No, it's on hold due to COVID, right? But as it comes back online, and how can people, I realize it's a select group, you have more applicants than you can take every year. So tell me, how soon people should consider it, if there's any qualifications that might move them to the top of the list, or any involvement activities that might move them to the top of the list or for consideration.
Yeah, the Citizens Academy is an application process, and we can provide those applications to you guys right now. So if you get a hold of of me, we can make that happen. And then we don't have an exact date for the next one yet. We were hoping to do one around now, but we're still not clear to do that yet. So if I'm guessing, again, this is just a guess, I could see us doing one maybe in the fall. So we are taking applications right now. It's a pretty intense application process, and it's a little bit like getting a background investigation because, obviously we don't want to have people who've been arrested a million times and things like that in here, because we are sharing some pretty intimate details of the way we operate with you guys. I mean, that's the reality of making sure that you understand how we do our job or why we do our job. So it's an application process. The competition is really stiff. I got to be honest with you. We look for folks like you have in your organization who are community leaders. We look for people who are in the banking industry and in the real estate industry and working at Publix. And I'm just giving you some examples of people we've had. We look for attorneys and local business owners, all people you have in your organization for sure. But the competition is stiff. I'll give a shout out to my partners at the FBI. They have a Citizens Academy as well, and they run a really nice one as well. So if you can't get into ours as the first option, that's always a second option.
Great. Well, you might see my name on an application in your next class.
Yeah.
Tell me, and I really appreciate all the information you've shared this morning. What about for those, we always recognize that going into law enforcement is a sacrifice, right? At whatever level it is that you're giving back in your service in your community. So we're grateful for those that are willing to do that. Some of those have been members of my family, and I am always grateful for those that are willing to give back and service, whether it be federal or local, through law enforcement. So tell us a little bit about, for if there's those listening that might be interested in a career shift and they would like to come work for Homeland Security Investigations. Tell us a little bit about what that process or what they might think and consider if they're considering that shift.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a good question. I know I mentioned that and I didn't have it in my presentation. I apologize. So becoming an agent is a process. It's a long, arduous process. But the reason for that, there are some reasons for that. And one of the reasons is it's about the commitment and the commitment you want to show to becoming a law enforcement officer. This job is not for everybody. There are, some really nasty things you have to deal with in terms of, the types of investigations you're working in. So the process is long and arduous, and it's about the commitment towards that process. So obviously we want people who have not been in trouble. That's, obvious for most law enforcement agencies, and we're no different. There is some wiggle room in there, and times are changing and things like that. So there is definitely some space in there to have some issues in your life that everyone makes mistakes. But the reality is they want people who have not been in trouble. We want people who are educated, college educated. We look for people who come out of the military, obviously. That's an easy transition. The process from front to back can take sometimes upwards of a year because you're going through medical evaluations, physical fitness evaluations, background investigations, and then that all culminates in you going to the academy. You get your selection, you get told, this is where you're going to go, San Diego, Denver, whatever. Do you want the job, take it or leave it. You get to move and you go at your business. You go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which is in Glencoe, Georgia. And that academy, we call it, is about 6 months. It's an interesting place because all federal agents go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, except for the FBI and the DEA. They do their own thing in Quantico, Virginia. But you have ATF agents, Secret Service agents, the Marshal Service, IRS agents, ourselves. We all go to the same basic training, which we call Criminal Investigator Training Program at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And then after graduating from that, you go to what you call your follow-on course. And that would be HSI Special Agent Training. And all total, the training itself is in residence. You live there. It takes about 6 months. And again, it's a commitment, so it's part of knowing that you're committed to becoming a law enforcement officer. And after that, you report to your duty station, you start your job. So yeah, the people who are interested in applying to jobs with Homeland Security Investigations can find stuff on our website, which you can Google Homeland Security Investigations and you can get the website. Or the federal government has a hiring website called USA Jobs. And again, if you Google, the website changes. It used to be usajobs.opm.gov, but I think it might have changed. So if you just go to Google and Google USA Jobs, you'll see the website where you can find all federal jobs. And if you search by job series 1811, that's the federal job series for criminal investigator, you'll find information on how to become a special agent with all federal agencies, all law enforcement agencies.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the information. I look forward to chatting with you again soon, but we appreciate all the work that you do to protect our community in the Tampa Bay region.
Can I just mention one more quick thing?
Sure.
We have a program here called the HERO program, and it's a really important program to us, and I should have put it in my presentation, I apologize, but HERO stands for Human Exploitation Rescue Operative. And that is a program that we are really proud of here at HSI because we are really the only people doing it. We started this program with the Wounded Warriors and through SOCOM many years ago. And essentially what we've done is we've been able to take Wounded Warriors and train them as computer forensics analysts and intel analysts and all kinds of other jobs we have, and basically give them another purpose. So we have several of them here in Tampa. Tampa has become kind of the training point for these folks. So at any one time, we might have 5 or 6 of these guys here training. And again, all of them are Wounded Warriors, veterans from the wars, in Iraq and Afghanistan primarily, who have been trained to do computer forensics analysis and are really repurposed in their life, helping to save kids, helping to save victims of exploitation, crimes. And it's a super important program for us called the HERO program. So if anybody out there is listening and might fit into that category of a Wounded Warrior who's looking for some purpose in life, we have some great folks here who could talk to you about that program and get you involved if you want to be involved.
I love that. That is great. So for those of you that are listening and may not be watching, Mike, can you give us your email address?
Yep, it's Michael, Michael, .b like boy, .Cochran, COCHRAN, at DHS, like Department of Homeland Security, .gov. And I can put it back up on the screen if you need it. But
absolutely, and we'll put it in the notes as well. So for those of you that if you're looking at this through a podcast, it'll be in the show notes, and certainly on social media, we'll put it in the comments and in the notes as well. So thank you again, Mike. We appreciate you joining us, and I look forward, like I said, look forward to hearing more soon and connecting on some of these others, the kind of the pockets of work that you do individually.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.